The sun had already set when the courthouse finally emptied. Reporters gathered near the steps, their microphones catching fragments of celebration and disbelief. Inside, the janitor swept away coffee cups and torn notes left behind by a crowd that had witnessed something unforgettable. Lena Carter remained seated long after everyone had gone. The courtroom was silent now, a strange peace after weeks of noise. She stared at the empty judge's bench, then at the chair where Brian had sat. For a moment she wondered, how many choices had led them here? When did good intentions become greed? She stood slowly, collecting her folders. They no longer felt heavy. Her footsteps echoed softly as she walked out. Outside, the night was alive. People surrounded her, shaking her hand, thanking her. "You saved our homes," one elderly woman said with trembling fingers. "You gave us our voice back." Lena smiled, but her eyes were wet. "No," she replied gently. "We did it together." A few streets away, Brian Turner sat alone in a holding cell. The steel bench was cold against his palms. He stared at the floor, trying to replay every moment of the trial. But the sounds kept overlapping. His lawyer's last words, the judge's voice, Lena's testimony. He had thought power made him untouchable. For years, he built walls of control, hiding behind polished reports and fake smiles. Now those walls had turned into bars. A guard approached. "You have one visitor." Brian looked up, confused. Through the glass partition, he saw someone unexpected. His son, Michael. They hadn't spoken in months. Michael's face carried the quiet disappointment of a child who had grown up watching his father's empire crumble. They sat in silence for a while, separated by glass and guilt. "Dad," Michael finally said, "was it worth it?" Brian couldn't answer. His throat tightened. "I wanted to build something lasting." Michael shook his head. "You did, but not what you think." He stood to leave. "You taught everyone what happens when trust is broken." When he left, Brian rested his forehead against the glass. For the first time, he wasn't angry at anyone, just himself. Days turned into weeks. The HOA office was cleaned out and reopened under temporary management. Boxes of documents were stacked everywhere, old files being audited, and new policies being drafted. Lena volunteered to help. She didn't want a title, not even credit. She just wanted transparency. Every day she sat in front of a laptop, uploading scanned documents, creating public records, making sure every homeowner could see where every dollar went. "Lena, you've done enough," her friend Maya told her one evening. "You should rest." But Lena shook her head. "Rest is what they did while this happened. I can't stop now." Across town, small changes began to appear. The broken fountain in the Central Park was repaired. The playground lights flickered on again after years of darkness. The same park that had once been a symbol of neglect was now full of children's laughter. Local businesses, inspired by the story, donated materials and funds to help rebuild the community. A mural was painted near the main gate. "Truth is the foundation of every home." Meanwhile, national news channels ran follow-ups. "HOA scandal turns into model for reform," read one headline. "Whistleblower inspires new HOA Transparency Act," read another. Interviews poured in for Lena, but she declined most. "The story isn't about me," she told one reporter. "It's about us learning to never look away again." Months passed. The neighborhood began to heal, but scars remained. Some homeowners still distrusted any kind of authority. Meetings were filled with debates, suspicion, and reminders of what had happened. One night, a new board meeting was called to discuss security upgrades. The hall was full. Lena stood quietly at the back while a new face addressed the crowd, a young man named Daniel, recently elected as the new HOA president. "Transparency is our only safeguard," Daniel said firmly. "From now on, all HOA meetings will be recorded and published. Every budget, every vote, every voice will count." Lena smiled faintly. This was the change she had hoped for. She slipped out quietly before the applause began. Back at her home, Lena opened her old camera, the same one she used to capture evidence months ago. Now she used it to capture moments of recovery, children playing, trees being planted, lights flickering back to life. She started a small blog titled Rebuilding Home. It wasn't about scandal, it was about healing. Each post told stories of people who once felt powerless, but now found strength in unity. One post read, "Maybe justice isn't a finish line. Maybe it's a seed we keep watering, even when no one is watching." The post went viral, shared thousands of times. Her words began to inspire communities far beyond her own. Meanwhile, in prison, Brian sat in a workshop cutting wood. It was part of his rehabilitation program. One day, an officer handed him a letter. It was from Lena. He hesitated before opening it. Inside were only a few lines. You hurt a lot of people, but admitting it is the first step to fixing what's broken. I hope someday you'll understand that power isn't control, it's responsibility. For the first time in months, Brian cried silently. He folded the letter and placed it inside a small wooden box he had built. Later, he requested to donate part of his prison earnings to the HOA Restoration Fund. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Years passed. Seasons changed. The community flourished again. New families moved in, unaware of the storm that once tore it apart. One day, during the annual community fair, Lena walked through the park where the old fountain now sparkled in the sunlight. Kids laughed, music played, and banners read, 5 years of rebuilding together. Daniel, now serving his second term as HOA president, spotted her. We've got a surprise, he said with a grin. He led her to the center of the park, where a new bench had been placed under a blooming tree. A small plaque read, in honor of Lena Carter, who reminded us that truth builds stronger homes. The crowd clapped as she sat down, her eyes shining. I didn't do it alone, she said softly. That evening, as the fair lights glowed against the dusk, Lena looked around, at the laughter, at the trust restored, and realized something profound. Justice hadn't ended with a verdict. It had only begun. The camera pulled back, rising above the rooftops, showing a neighborhood alive with light and unity. Voiceover. Every home stands on trust. Every community survives on truth. And sometimes it takes one person's courage to remind everyone what home really means. Fade to black. HOA, the verdict, extended cut.